Well, welcome back, everyone, and thank you for your attention to our past speakers, our past discussions. It's been fantastic. We hope that everyone's beginning to see sort of the breadth of this initiative to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for AA and NHPI communities. The Commission, the IWG, the regional network are all different ways and yet collaborative to reach this goal that we have that has been set for us. But it is my pleasure now to introduce our next panel on opportunities and lessons learned from past commissioners. These are just incredible leaders that have just been in our communities and have walked the walk over many years. So we have a lot to learn from them. And they have a wide range of experience and expertise they'll share with us and provide food for thought as we sort of move forward on our work. So let me first start with Tessie Guillermo was appointed to the Presidential Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders by President Clinton. She is currently the chairwoman of the board of Common Spirit Health, the largest nonprofit healthcare system in the United States. And I was lucky enough to have dinner with Tessie a few weeks ago in California. Ms. Daphne Kwok was appointed by President Barack Obama and served as the chair of the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. She is AARP's Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Asian American and Pacific Islander Audience Strategy. Dr. Tung Nguyen was appointed to the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders by President Obama and succeeded Ms. Kwok as commission chair. Dr. Nguyen is a physician researcher and professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. Ms. Chilling Tong was appointed to the Presidential Advisory Commission on Asian American and Pacific Islanders by both Presidents Bush and Trump. Ms. Tong is the president and CEO of the Asian and Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship. It's such a pleasure to have all of you here. Thank you for your work on the commission, and thank you for joining us today, because I think your insights are going to be very important for us as we move forward. So let me start with a question to all of you, and we will have questions for commissioners to ask each of you at the end of this. Given your past experiences, what are ways for the commission to be most effective? Tessie, I'm just going to go across my screen since you're the first on my screen. Would you mind going first?
Sure, no problem. And thanks. And wonderful to see you and meet all of you on screen, and great to see some of my good and old friends on the commission, and congratulations to you all. The times have changed so much since the first commission was in place. And so the ability to be effective, I think, kind of goes along with the times. And so I think the most important thing, and you just had the panel on the regional liaisons and the work that can be done regionally, between then and now, my advice, my sense is the most impactful ways to be effective really do happen at the local and the national level. And so that constituency-driven representation, listening to what's happening on the ground then and translating that into sort of a power base that goes from the ground up, really is what stands the test of time. So, just sort of generally in a nutshell, that's what I would recommend, and happy to talk more about it later.
Thanks, Daphne. Thanks, Tessie. Daphne?
Well, thank you so much, Sonal. And congratulations to all the commissioners. And as Tessie said, there are a lot of good friends here, and then there are a lot of new friends here. And we very much want to be of assistance to you throughout your tenure. And I'll say we're probably all very jealous of you that you get to serve during this very, very important time for our nation. I would say what Tessie said was extremely right. The regional, at that local level, and all of you are representing communities at that local level, is so very key. And so I would say, and just picking up on Kai Ying's point about getting to know the region and her area, how important it is to connect with career staff at that local level is very, very key, as well as the work that you're doing at the national level. I'd also say that you really are the ears and eyes of the administration down on the ground. ground. You are the conduit from the community to the administration and vice versa. And I hope that you'll use this opportunity to really continue to empower and engage our community, even from the time that we served till now. I'm so proud of the community that we have really advanced in the area of empowerment. And so I think that for you to be able to inform and educate and engage our community so they get to learn the process, have them be part of the process is going to be so key as we continue to empower our community. And so those would be the two main points that I'd like to share.
Thank you, Daphne. Tung?
Thank you, Sonal, and congratulations to all the commissioners. I was just trying to remember what it was like when I first got appointed to the commission. And I actually came on a couple of years later than the first Obama commission, and I was pretty overwhelmed. Felt like it was a lot of stuff to do. And in a sense, you were at the sense of being a kid in a candy store. It was just so much stuff. I mean, it was so much good stuff. But it took me almost like a year to figure out how to make it work. And as proof of that, they gave me a remedial appointment to the second commission because I didn't get it done right, so I got to do it again. But I will tell you four things that I think are really important, and we can get into details if we want. I think what I figured out the role was that we are going to be the mediator between the community, the White House, and the federal government, as seen through other departments and other offices. And these problems that we're all trying to address can't be addressed without collaboration and coordination. And in many ways, the commissioners are the connector between those three elements. Second, I would advise the commissioner to pick some key issues to work on. I'm sure you already have your key issues. And of course, you want to work on the issues that you're passionate about. But also think about other topics on which you can have influence, because otherwise you don't want to limit yourself and your influence, particularly when you're talking about structural issues. And what I mean by that, I'll talk about later. Third, I think it's really important for us to work very closely with the staff. So in addition to the usual commission meeting, there's going to be meetings between you and staff on particular topics. And that's actually where I think a lot of the work gets done. The commission meetings are nice and of course, very important, but the work really gets carried out when you're not together as a whole commission. The one thing that's really important about that is when your staff's working with department heads, particularly people who are very high-ranking, you actually are the ones who carry the influence, not the staff. The staff are, in the federal government, are at a lower level than the people they're talking to in the department. So I think you need to be there for the staff. And then finally, I'm glad that the regional network went before us, because I thought that was a brilliant innovation. This is the way that commissioners get to really feel the impact. I don't live in D.C. I don't get to go to meetings in D.C. all the time, which you really need to if you are there. But this is how I get to engage with the federal government and bring my influence at the local level. So really encourage you to really connect with the regional network leaders in your region and work very closely with them. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That's such great advice. Chilling.
So no, thank you for your invitation and leadership. I really want to congratulate all the new commissioners for your first public meeting. How exciting. And what a great agenda and discussion today. The President's Advisory Commission on AAPIs has established great credibility when it was chaired by Secretary Norman Mineta in 2001. Since then, the Commission has consisted of outstanding business and civil leaders who deeply engage with our community, like all of you. And we are especially excited that the Secretary Behera and Ambassador Tai, as a commissioner's co-chair, of course, as Crystal to serve as the executive director, it's just such a wonderful dream team. I think both the Commission and the White House AA and NHPI initiative need sufficient resources and a strong support from the White House and host agency like HHS in order to be effective. I'm sure they will. And each commissioner plays a significant role to advise the President on ways the public and private and nonprofit sectors can work together to advance equity and opportunity for every AA and NHPI community. It will be critical that the Commission maintain strong lines of communication across all federal agencies to ensure that each one is working in tandem on how to best serve the AA and NHPI community. The regional network plays a significant role. The co-chair Ben and the Paul has done a great job, but I really wish Commissioner can also, to engage with them too. I think the community will also like to see Commission open to hearing from voices across all sectors and to be inclusive of all NHPI subgroups as possible. As Daphne and Tessie has mentioned, local. It is just so critical to engage a local level. And it's also be important that Commission frequently reach out to the community for data, research, and surveys related to the AA and NHPI communities. This action should be included in broader discussions about equity. Another very important task is the presentation of the report to the President. It is never too early to start the preparation. Time flies. And the administration would respond to the report within a limited time period, and as well as to involve the commissioners in advance in relevant policy discussion. We really applaud the Biden administration's efforts to uplift a diverse set of leaders throughout the administration, and it's created a historically diverse administration in which 15% of all appointees identity as Asian American and Pacific Islanders. I personally really applaud Erica Morosugu's great leadership and appointment. But at the same time, we urge the Commission and also administration to continue advancing AA and NHPI leaders and to set an example for the private sector to do the same. And we want to, to have a commission, hopefully outreach to young AA and NHPI leaders to deliver key messages through all the different social media. Thank you.
Jillian, thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm going to ask specific questions of each of you, and then we're going to open it up to everybody. So Daphne, I'm going to start with you. Anti-Asian hate is really at the top of mind, and it is something that it's been around for a long time, but it's since 2020 it's increased, and we're seeing it even continue to increase. So, what do you think this commission should do or can do?
Well, I think what's great is that there is a very strong mandate, right? Especially with President Biden's passage of the COVID-19 Hate Crime Act as well, too. And so I think one of the things, too, is we got to use our bully pulpit, right? Your bully pulpit, to be able to continue to make this and make it known that this is still an issue. I think people will say, oh, it's gone. It's no longer an issue. But unfortunately, as we all know, we're hearing about incidences every single day. I think it's also important about the enforcement, right, of hate crimes laws. And we have to remember that the collection of hate crime data by local law enforcement is not mandated. So the numbers that are in the books is certainly not a true picture. And so I think one of the things is to really push for mandated collection of hate crime data. As we know, data is everything. If we don't have the data to prove that these cases are happening, it's not going to help. So I think that that's one of the things. The other thing is that there are several major anniversary dates, unfortunate anniversary dates that are coming up. The one that's coming up very soon, March 16th, the Atlanta first anniversary. June 19th, the 40th anniversary of the Vincent Chin murder, which was so seminal for our AAPI history. And so with these opportunities, unfortunate opportunities, is the continued opportunity to continue to inform and educate. And I'll just close by saying the concept, and I think it was Crystal who talked about it, belonging. I'm really starting to latch on to that concept as we talk about, DE&I, but the belonging is so fundamental. What can we do as a nation to ensure that all of us truly belong to this nation? And I think we see some great movement right now, especially in curriculum at the K through 12, as we've seen Illinois pass mandatory Asian American studies, New Jersey, Connecticut, California, and others down the line. So I hope that we will also focus on belonging as well. And the work in coalition outside of the AA and NHPI community, but truly working in coalition with other, especially communities of color and the LGBTQ community as well.
Daphne, thank you so much. And I know Crystal had mentioned also working across the different groups across the government. So I think this is the collaboration, coordination is so important, but also just recognizing that there's an opportunity here with the very unfortunate anniversaries to actually push through. Tom, in reviewing the past reports and recommendations from former commissions, I noticed that the data disaggregation language access has been consistently a question that has come up. Do you have insights or recommendations, and how do we actually get moving on this? What do we need to do?
Yeah, I'm glad I'm following Daphne in that question, because actually I'm going to link that question to this question. And we'll start with anti-Asian hate and racism. You know, we know that racism comes in all sort of flavor, from the individual acts, which is the one that gets everybody's attention, the insults, the violence, and the murders. But also there are structural racism issues, right? And I think we have to address both. And so here's my structural equivalent for the individual behaviors. You all look alike. The structural equivalent is we don't have any disaggregated data for you. Learn to speak English. The structural equivalent for that is we don't give you language access if you don't speak English. You are all not good enough. And the structural equivalent lies for that is that we don't have workforce diversity, particularly at the leadership level. So I think as a commissioner, I think you have the opportunity to look at all of this from all angles. And I think that's what, so when I said the candy store, I think that's what I meant, is that you can fix the individual and you can fix the foundational issue behind this. And fundamentally, clearly, anti-Asian racism is probably the topmost thing, but you can work on workforce diversity, on disaggregated data, and on language access within that context too. So I wanted to at least emphasize that. And when I talked about things that you can do besides the topic of interest, these are the things that I'm talking about. Because underlying every single topic that you care about, whichever they are these issues. Okay, so you can solve a particular policy issue, but you can't solve the underlying reasons why that policy issue came up if you don't actually address these issues. And to do so, I think the commissioners, have to be advocates in the government. And by being an advocate, what I mean is do what you already do as advocates: be loud, be clear, and be repetitive. Say it over and over and over again. I bring this up at every single meeting, and actually, it's much better when it's brought up by the other people in the meeting, not me. But if it doesn't get brought up, it gets brought up. They need to understand, whether you're meeting with a department head or a frontline staff of a department, that this is important, and we're going to keep on hammering on it until they resolve the issue to our satisfaction. I think we have to hold people accountable in private and smaller meetings, and in public meetings we have to ask the hard questions. We cannot back away from this. We've had this problem with lack of disaggregated data and lack of language access ever since this government has existed. So there isn't any reason to think that it will get better unless we push really, really hard. I think for all of you, you can bring any experience you had in creating interim solutions. For example, very small example, I'm a researcher who get funding from the National Institute of Health, and when we were on the commission, they took away any possibility of having any Asian Americans as part of their diversity efforts. And then the justification was that Asian Americans are overrepresented. And what we did as a group was to go back to the NIH using my hat as a commissioner, because I'm from the White House, they'll meet with me. And I said, well, there are, if you look at disaggregated data, some Asians who are not overrepresented. So you have to at least, put a mechanism in there where that's actually addressed. And they actually did. So small example, interim solution, but a commissioner can actually get people to the table that I, as a researcher and a professor of medicine, cannot. And so I would leverage that very strongly. I think, thinking creative with the staff and the departments, and then bringing the community whenever needed. The other thing that came up that was really interesting was there's a cost issue with disaggregated data and language access. We need to think creatively with our technological partners about how to do this, because sometimes the answer would be like, we have no money to do it. And we may be able to come up with a technological solution that's also an interim solution, but at least we can do that. So thanks.
Yeah, it's super helpful. And I think the points you make actually also lead back to Daphne's point about belonging. So it sort of adds into how do we create belonging, and these questions and the points you're making are super important. And again, to my colleagues, I think this is one of the more important things of how do we use our power effectively as commissioners. Tessie, There are many issues raised in the 1990s when you were on the commission and during the Clinton administration that continue to be barriers for AA and HPI communities today. Do you want to just talk about a few of them and things that advice you might have?
Sure. I went back and reviewed the first report that we issued in 2001. The reality is, all of those issues then and now, they're formed over decades of experience that our communities have faced, in terms of, racism, xenophobia, lack of political power, social injustice, and so on. So, as groundbreaking and ambitious as the first commission and the initiative was, and, I still have heartache in terms of how long it took to actually get it done, even as we raised those issues. But, they weren't going to get solved in, a presidential term, nor solved in the 20 years since, right? So the issues aren't new, and in many ways they're more complex, right? So our role at the time was really to bring for the first time sort of a consolidated attention on a national and federal level. To these issues and to these injustices and to these concerns that were identified and prioritized by the communities themselves, not from a top-down sort of treetops, disconnected spokes group or spokesperson. And so that process was really, really important. And then to embed them, in the institutions that existed at the federal level. And I'll admit at the time, our focus was primarily at the national and federal level, because that's the opportunity that we had. But it was to build a foundation, and embed those, for the solutions and dialogue and accountability for the future. So data collection, language access, civil rights protections, inclusion, capacity building, funding, all of those things, they existed then, they exist now. Now it's a matter of sort of scale and scope, right, and prioritization. And then, obviously the COVID pandemic has just exacerbated health disparities, for instance, and the experiences that we've had over the last years with the heightened visibility around anti-Asian violence have also just called much more attention and accountability, I think, to any entity that has responsibility in the public for addressing them. And those barriers all still exist externally. But I think internally we have a lot more barriers than existed then. And if I could just list, you are all obvious, they're obvious to you, but, we have greater diversity than ever before, right, in our communities. We have generational differences. I mean, it's been a generation and a half that has passed since, 2000. And this generation that exists now that is claiming power, they can't wait, and we can't wait, for them to give them a seat. They need to be driving things now, right? There's technology and geographic divides that are heightened, a higher degree of fragmentation, and a higher degree of expectation for results sooner versus later. So, one of the pieces of advice I would have is, I don't know if it's controversial or not. I mean, it would have been controversial back in 2000s. Don't spend a lot of time trying to build consensus. We know the issues, and at the local level, they have emerged and they've been articulated. So I think right now we have to focus on a balance between process and swift action. Right? Take advantage of the time and the visibility and the positioning that you have both as individual commissioners, as Tung demonstrated, being able to say, I'm from the White House, I've got this issue, I'm going to go and force some action on it. And so, building power and taking advantage of your issues at the local and regional level is important. But I also think that what we didn't understand back then was really internalizing and understanding the role of the private sector, and now even more so, what role they have in moving policy funding dollars, all kinds of attention today versus back then. So really those leveraging our economic power as both consumers, as business leaders, as civic leaders, strategically is really much more important, I think, today, and we have the tools to do that. Popular culture. I mean, it's not just about the visibility that we've had around the acts of anti-Asian violence, but it's also the rising popularity, the rising understanding, the rising immersion of Asian cultural practices, behavior, and so on, that I think we really can take advantage of, whether it be, food, movies, media, all kinds of things that we can leverage those who are willing to act as leaders in their sphere to do that. And as Chilling talked about, social media, digital technology, those kinds of things we have at our fingertips, and we can leverage. This generation of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, they know how to leverage that better than our generation did at any point in time. And so all of those create opportunities for progress that didn't exist in 20 years ago. And to the degree that they do today. So that would be, sort of my statement in offer to the Commission today as you begin your work.
Thanks, Tessie. It's important to recognize that this is, we're always building the building blocks, and as we strengthen those building blocks, we can keep doing more and keep pushing for more. Chilling, Tessie sort of got to this point about on economics, and I want to just talk a little bit about economic equity. We've seen the AA, NHPI communities and businesses have been disproportionately affected in COVID, and along with the rise in anti-Asian hate and xenophobia. What do you think, given your experience, what do you think we should be doing on economic equity?
Yeah, unfortunately, COVID and anti-AAPI hate still greatly impact our AA and NHPI small business community. Our organization, National AIDS, conducted 2 national surveys in partnership with U.S. Black Chamber, U.S. Hispanic Chamber, and measure how COVID-19 affected AAPI and AA and NHPI, and also minority-owned small business. We find that 1 in 3 female AA and NHPI business owners experienced direct racial bias and discrimination, and 84% of business owners reported that the COVID-19 has had a negative impact on their business. We also find that 36% of the incidents happen at the place of business, and a disappropriate number of attacks have been direct at the AA and NHPI women business owners. Well, recently we have seen actress Olivia Munn reported that her online call on stopping AAPI hate was Zoom bombed with racist pictures and audio. And also yesterday, NBC News reported anti-Asian hate crimes increased 339% nationwide last year. So, to combat anti-Asian hate, anti-bias training program, should be integrated into diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts among federal employees, and also private companies can be encouraged to implement the same policy within their own workforce. We also then learned that a significant portion of AA and NHPI small business owners, I would say 61%, did not have access to federal relief program because of language barrier, like a PPP elder loan during the pandemic, because they don't think they are qualified and they find the application process is complicated, or they are unaware that aid was available to them. So for AHPI business owner, access to capital, access to contracting opportunities, access to technology are still very challenges. And right now, like many others, the AA and HPI business community is feeling the impact of supply chain issues. One of the business owners based in Washington was in danger of having their product dropped from Safeway, Kroger, and Costco because their containers were stuck in the port Seattle for over 2 months. So this is an ongoing issue within minority community, particularly among AA and NHPI. That said, it's important to use the reach of this commission and also other Asian American Chamber of Commerce and business organization to amplify this form of relief and other important resources. During the pandemic, because of CARE Act grant, National AIDS received a grant to help more than 17,000 business owners, and were able to continue the program through private contributions after the NBDA funding expired. So it is so critical to have a commission to inform all our community, especially business community, the federal resources there and our community can utilize. Thank you.
Thank you, Chilling. I have to say, I feel like this panel could go on for another hour and I still wouldn't get enough information because I think Tung put it well. It's so overwhelming at the beginning that you're sort of just absorbing this information. I'd like to open up to all of our commissioners to ask questions of each of you. I've sort of run through base questions, but I think there's a lot here. And I just want to thank all of you for making the time to talk to us and hope you'll be available to us as we sort of move forward too, because I know you've got a lot of experience that you can give to us. So anybody, my colleagues, please do raise your hand and we'll make sure we can get you to ask any questions you have. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks. It's not really a question, but I just wanted to comment that Dr. Tung Nguyen's framing of what structural racism looks like for the AA and NHPI community is one of the best ways I've heard it described. So I just wanted to thank him for that.
Kevin, I have to say I was taking notes the whole time he was talking, so I 100% agree with you. And if somebody had just raised their hand and they put it down, so I apologize. Teresita.
Yes, I really appreciate what Tessie was saying about let's not waste time about building consensus. I know everybody wants to build consensus, but it just feels to me like so many issues are in our faces right now with a divided country. But I am concerned that we have such a long list. So what I would like to ask the panelists is which top 2 or 3 issues do you think we should be tackling? And I'd like to hear from everybody on the panel.
Well, maybe I'll go first. Oh, oops, Tung.
Sorry, you're my chair, so you get to go first.
Okay. So I would say the impact of COVID, absolutely, right? And the anti-Asian hate. I think the two of them, the double pandemic, as I call them, right? As it impacts our community, especially for our elders. And I hope that is a subgroup that is really raised in priority, in the impact, the social isolation, the mental health of our elders, as Tung knows all too well, is really been very detrimental. Those would be the two.
Can I go, Sona?
Please.
Yeah, so there's obviously many things we can work on, but from the standpoint of where I sit, the biggest issue is misinformation, disinformation, particularly not just among Asian Americans who speak English, but those who don't. And you can see that the disinformation, misinformation has caused a lot of problems on the health side, right? So with COVID, people are dying from it. But it also causes problems in many, many other places as well. And one of the things I was talking to some of the staff about is the idea that we need to have better information, not just about health and COVID and all these other things, but also better information about what it means to be AA and HPI. Because I think most of our communities don't actually know the history of AA and HPI. They don't understand when we talk about racism. Like a lot of people who just came here may not know anything about racism because they haven't experienced it. They live in a community where they're protected from it, for example. Hundreds of years of anti-Asian and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander hate has caused us to be where we are. We need a better understanding of what history is. We need a better understanding what the model minority myth and why it's so toxic to us and to other people of color. So I just hope that as a community, commission, you all decide to participate in community engagement on the topic of misinformation, disinformation, in the topics that you care about, but also in the general history of the movement and how we got here. Like the fact that we used the term Asian Americans, that would have been unthinkable, 50 years ago, because nobody knew what an Asian American was 50 years ago. So things like that. Thanks.
I totally agree with you. From economic point of view, as I mentioned, access to capital, access to contracting opportunity. But personally, I think education plays a key role in combating anti-Asian hate and promoting inclusion. Anti-Asian hate and xenophobia in general stem from a tendency to alienate members of the AA and NHPI community rather than viewing them as Americans who belong. Most Americans are taught very, very little about the Asian American and Asian American history, are unaware of the significant contribution they make to American society and to the economy. This goes back a long way. AA and NHPIs fought in the war, built the railroads, fueled California's gold rush. Education must go beyond what is covered in AAPI Heritage Month. I really believe that this is a joint effort, and we should teach the general American about what our contribution to this country.
I would agree with that. But one of the things that I think would be really sort of opportune and important for this commission to be able to do is to really sort of corral the energy and the ability of this generation of activists and advocates and leaders into the actions that you're going to take on any issue. Generations are changing quickly, and we've got a generation of young people who not only don't know all of the history of our Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, but they are characterizing themselves quite differently than we did. Right. So to the extent that we want to educate the public, the general public, on what does it mean to be Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders, at that time, we've got a generation who are defining it even differently than we would in terms of the history that we're very familiar with. And they're going to activate around that. And they're going to be the ones who are really going to change the institutions and build the institutions for the future. So finding ways to really have that leadership and the issues and the way that they define the issues and the solutions is going to be really important.
Thank you all. I see Smitha put her hand down. So Grace.
Oh, sorry, I need to unmute. So I have a question around, how the Commission in the past and any recommendations you have for us address the topic of immigration and migration, given that intersects with all of the pieces that you've been talking about, and I see it from the intersectional lens of the hate that our communities are perceived as the perpetual other, and the fact that my perspective really is that the immigration system is broken. And so I'm curious, any recommendations or thoughts you have on, how that's been integrated and whether there's pieces that you feel that we need to move forward. So.
I'll take a crack since the ones that, there are many things that you're going to be confronted with in the commission that you want to solve. And the commission is a place where you can solve some of it, not all of it. and I think the thing that I learned the most about the commission was because I was always thinking that the government was going to solve my problems or our problems for us and my problems for me. Once I got into the government, I realized, no, there are many problems that even, department heads and all these people can't solve. And so the most important thing is to identify what the sort of the barriers are and then think about the appropriate solutions. And some of those appropriate solutions are actually in the government and where the commission has some influence, and there are other places where other things that can only be solved outside, and that's when I go back to the community and work with my community on how to solve it. So just a very broad, generalized answer to that.
Smitha, I'm going to take the last question. Kamal, maybe both of you can ask, but I just want to, because we're going to cut into a break again and we didn't have a break. Is that okay? Okay, so Smitha, I'm going to let you go. Oh, you put your hand down.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I'm going to be quick. First, Sonal, I go with the Smita as the pronunciation of my first name instead of Smita. I just want to thank all of you for, all of you have brought so much to our discussion today. As expected, with 4 different presidents, very different viewpoints or different contributions on how we can engage the community, and also valuable. So I really appreciate everything that you've commented on today. Thank you.
Kamal, do you want to ask really quickly?
Yeah, sure. I'll be real quick. Such a pleasure to hear from all of you guys, and you bring a wealth of knowledge from your individual, unique perspectives. Tung, you mentioned how you reached out to different offices using your White House credentials. What's the most graceful way to do that? I know that there's a need to coordinate with staff, and I know that can become chaotic, but there's a need to balance that with the need to go forth and do great things. So what is your advice on that?
I think the staff is going to be very helpful on that. First of all, I didn't even know who I needed to meet with. So the staff helps you to identify the right partners at the meetings. But I think the way to do that from my perspective was to ask the staff, I want to meet with someone on this topic. Who would those people be? And then can we make the request as the White House commissioner making the request? And that way, the request isn't coming from a staff member; it's actually coming from the White House, believe it or not. So that's actually how you get access.
Thanks.
Hope that answers you.
I think we have a break coming up. First, I want to say thank you to all of you for coming on and for just being so gracious with your time. I know we'll probably be asking you many questions, but and more to come. But it really, like, the insights you've given here are so important and poignant. And to my colleagues, this is going to be important as we deliberate sort of the subcommittees and sort of what we want to get done. And again, because this is a rolling basis, we can imagine we don't have to do all at one time, but we can take on a few things at a time and keep in mind, I think, the idea that we can take on more. So I really appreciate all of you coming on, and thank you for being so gracious and answering these questions also, because these are questions that we're all sort of trying to figure out how to get our hands around the scope of what we can do and should do. Well, for everyone here, we have about 10-minute breaks, 7-minute break. We're going to come back at 4:10. So thank you again for staying on, and I look forward to seeing Daphne, Tessie, Tung, and Chilling again soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.